Hello. Ni hao. Annyeong. Bonjour. Hola. Well, learning a language is totally interesting, yet it can be somehow difficult too. So today, I'm going to talk about an interesting topic about language acquisition. I am Nika de la Vega, and please don't forget to subscribe to my channel for more videos. Without further ado, let's begin with our lesson proper. Okay, so I'll start with the outline. I'm gonna have a short icebreaker first, just to liven up the lesson, and then I'll discuss the question, what makes language learning interesting? And then I'll talk about the 5 hypotheses about second language acquisition. And this report will then be open for questions. So basically, if you have a lot of questions, you can list them down first and ask them in this period. Okay? All right. And then after, I'm going to give you a short but simple post test. I assure you it's very easy. It's just for me to identify whether you've learned something about my discussion, about our discussion, right? And last but not the least, I'm going to show you the sources where I've got the information that I'm sharing to you today, guys. Okay? So what are the objectives of my report, of my lesson? Basically, at the end of this lesson, I want everyone to be able to know the 5 hypotheses about second language acquisition. So I'm going to talk about each of these and discuss why they are important. Second, that is to understand the process of learning another language. So apparently, we are not born perfect. We are not born that we fully mastered a lot of languages already. So we still undergo a lot of processes, and we're going to understand those processes. Third, to see how we progress in learning another language. So for example, in English, we start with the 0 English level, and then we move on to low beginner, high beginner, what else? Intermediate, advanced, until we fully master the English language, right? Okay, so to keep the ball rolling, let's start with the icebreaker. So this icebreaker is called odd one out. So here, I'm going to give you a set of words and you have to figure out which one does not belong to the group of words. Sounds exciting, right? So let's begin. The first set of words that we have here consists of English, Chinese language, and Korean. So which word does not belong to the group? Okay, well then if your answer is language, then that is perfectly correct. Language is something that is general. It's a common noun, while English, Chinese, and Korean are proper nouns, right? So they are specific. So now let's move on to the second one. Swimming, skiing, diving, and snorkeling. Which one is odd here? All right. Well, then if your answer is skiing, then you are precisely correct. So swimming, diving, and snorkeling are all water activities, while skiing, of course, it's not a water activity. That makes it odd. Okay, so did you like this activity? Wait, there's more. Let's go to the third one. So the words are train, station, plane, and boat. Now, which one is odd here? All right, so that is a station. Okay, because a station is a regular stopping place on a public transportation route. Well, train, station, train, plane, and boat, these are types of transportation. Okay, so now let's go to the last but not the least. All right, so we have a hostel, a hotel, an apartment, and the beach. Okay, all right, let me hear your answer. Okay, all right, so if your answer is the beach, well, then your answer is perfectly correct. Beach is a place where we go swimming, right? Sounds good because now it's summer, but it's not. It doesn't belong to this group, right? Because a hostel, a hotel, an apartment, these are places to sleep. Okay, so thank you for that short icebreakers. And now let's go on to the next one here. Now I want to ask you some questions. How long have you been learning another language? Is it easy or difficult? Well, then, I certainly agree on what you've said. Okay, so the question is that what makes language learning interesting? Okay, yes, all right. I do agree. I certainly agree. Okay. Now, I want to share my answer to this question too. So, for me, language learning is interesting, especially if I'm able to utilize it and benefit from it. So, for example, I'm teaching English as a second language to foreign nationals. Unfortunately, most of them have this level. So, zero English to low beginner. Now the challenge is, how could I explain a certain word that is already in the simplest form? For example, the word mother, it's already in the simplest form. So how could I make it simplified or simpler rather? If the student doesn't understand that word, sometimes I translate it to their native language. So that is how I'm able to utilize the language that I'm learning. But you might also want to agree if I'm going to say that learning a language is also challenging, right? So what about you? What are the challenges that you encounter as you study another language? Oh, all right. I agree. It's very challenging. All right. So as for me, well, basically, I'm a language enthusiast. So aside from English, I'm also learning a lot of languages. So Chinese Mandarin, a little bit of Japanese if I still have enough time or more time rather. All right, I'm also learning Korean language, Spanish, and French. So I'm going to share my terrible experience when I was learning Chinese Mandarin. So generally, in Chinese Mandarin, there are four tones except for the neutral tone, which is the fifth tone. Okay. So even if you have just one word, if you're going to pronounce it differently, the meaning is going to change totally. For example, we have one single word, ma. So if I'm going to say ma, 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 the meaning is going to vary. All right. So I wanted to say mother, but apparently and unintentionally, I said ma, which means a hem or a drug. And everyone who was listening to me at that time, they looked at me as if I'm a drug lord. And that was very embarrassing. Imagine I said hemp, a drug, right? Okay. So the question is, did I stop learning that language when I failed? No, I didn't. So you agree. Learning a language is challenging. So since it's very challenging, we want to know what lies beyond language acquisition. All right. So now let's go to this one. Let's talk about the 5 hypotheses about second language acquisition. Well, the proponent of this theory is Stephen Krashen. And according to Krashen, the acquisition or language acquisition is a subconscious process, while learning is a conscious process. Take note, I would like to emphasize two terminologies: subconscious and conscious. So I'm going to tell you the differences between these terms as we go through our lesson today. All right? And the core parts of this theory is composed are composed of 5 interrelated hypotheses. All right? So, first one, the acquisition learning distinction, followed by the natural order hypothesis. Then, the monitor hypothesis, the input hypothesis, and last but not the least, the effective filter hypothesis, which we are going to look at in detail. Okay? So let me begin with the first one, and that is the acquisition learning distinction. So here we want to go back to the emphasized words that we had a while ago: subconscious and conscious. According to Krashen, language acquisition could be either subconscious or conscious. So when we say subconscious, that means it's unintentional. You're not fully aware of that. For example, when I was 8 years old, I went to my mother's hometown, and it's in Dolores, Eastern Samar, wherein their local language is Waray, right? Surprisingly, no one taught me the language. I just got, you know, startled that I was already able to speak the language, knowing that no one taught me the language. Probably because I perceive it, or I perceive the language every day. So it is unintentional. I was not aware that I was learning the language already, right? Okay, the second one is conscious, which is the opposite of subconscious. All right. So when you say conscious, that is explicit. When you say subconscious, that is implicit. Okay. So let's go back to conscious or explicit learning. So this is something that is intentional. For example, when I was in secondary education in high school, um, we studied Chinese Mandarin basically because it was part of our curriculum before. So I intentionally learned the language. Okay. So now, if this is clear already, let's go to the second hypothesis. That is the natural order hypothesis. So here, it states the idea that children who learn their first language or second language basically acquire knowledge about grammatical structure in a natural order. So the proper term here is that step by step. We learn using a step by step order. Okay? So, for example, when we are born, we started speaking using babbling. So, babbling, or we also call it murmuring. M, 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 b, 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 pa, pa, right? And then as time passes by, we learn how to pronounce words like mama, papa. Of course, at this period of time, our parents got really, really happy to hear us pronouncing these words, right? Okay, and then as we passed the toddler stage, we learn how to make sentences, though still has some lapses, right? For example, mama, eat. We say that instead of saying mama, I like to eat, right? So we say mama, eat. And then as time passes by, we learn how to make grammatically correct sentences. Mama, I like to eat. But then, of course, as time passes by and as we continuously learn this language, we started making complex sentences. Know how to say, Mom, I'm starving. I want to eat right now. Can you cook for me? Right? So you see, we undergo a step-by-step process, right? Okay. So now let's go on to the third process, and that is the monitor hypothesis. Okay. So in the monitor hypothesis, we actually learn here that language learners monitor, or they see themselves, and they monitor the language that they are producing. And this also explains the relationship between language acquisition and learning, and it defines the influence of the latter on the former. Okay? So in the monitor hypothesis, basically there are three conditions that you have to consider. So the first one is time, followed by focus on form, and know the rule. That was the third one. That is the third one, rather. So let's start with time. So Krashen explains that time is integral to learning. Okay. So for example, as we have casual conversations or like informal conversations to our friends, we never care whether our sentences adhere to the grammar rules, right? We don't care whether we make mispronounced words. And if we are concerned about correcting those mistakes, we want to slow down, we want to speak slowly and generate our ideas while speaking at the same time. So we see time is really important. This also explains why some people are generally better when it comes to oral English, or written English rather, than in oral English. Why? Certainly because in written English, we have an ample time to think while we are writing. But in oral English, we generate our ideas while speaking at the same time. And definitely, we cannot do two things at the same time perfectly, right? Okay. So now let's go to the second one, and that is focus on form. So focus on form, the proper term to remember here is the word correctness. So we want to correct ourselves when we make lapses when it comes to grammar, lapses when it comes to pronunciation. And the best example that we have here is Miss Pia Alonso Wurzbach. Very beautiful, right? So when she joined the pageant, this was what she said. So to be a Miss Universe is an honor and a responsibility. If I were to be Miss Universe, I will use my voice to influence the youth. And I would raise awareness to certain causes like HIV awareness that is timely and relevant to my country, which is the Philippines. I want to show the world, the universe rather, that I'm confidently beautiful with a heart. So here, as we guys have observed, she mistakenly said world instead of universe, wherein she joined the Miss Universe pageant and not the Miss World pageant. But she gorgeously corrected herself right away by saying, oh, the universe rather, right? So are you guys like this one too? Like you tried to when you noticed that you had a mistake, you try to correct yourself right away? Well then, you guys are like Miss Pia Alonso words back. Okay. All right, so now the last one is knowing the rule. So we are not born perfect, as I said a while ago. So this is in line with another theory, which is called tabula rasa. If you guys are familiar with tabula rasa, it explains that when we are born, our mind is like a blank bond paper. So, so nothing is in there. But as we grow older, as we accumulate a lot of information, this blank bond paper is getting filled with information. So same goes with this one. As we age, we know a lot of rules. When we are toddlers or when we are younger, we might know just the basic rules: subject, verb, object, a simple sentence pattern. And then we learn something that is more complicated. Subject, a simple subject, singular subject needs a singular verb. Plural subject needs a plural verb too. And we also learned a lot of exemptions to these rules, right? So it's getting more complicated as time passes by, right? So here we undergo a certain process in learning the rules in grammar to the point until we reach the point that we already mastered this language. Okay? And this theory comes with three basic types of performer. So we have the monitor over users, the monitor under users, and the optimal monitor users. So how are these performers different? Well, then let's figure out. Let's start with the first one, and that is the monitor over users. Okay, so these language learners are concerned or too focused on correctness to the point that they don't sound fluent anymore, right? So here's the thing. In reality, the more that you're too concerned about making mistakes, making lapses in grammar, making errors in pronunciation, the more that you do, the more that you make, right? So the key is that if you want to sound fluent, don't be self-centered. Don't focus too much on yourself. Okay? All right. And now let's go on to the next one. That is the monitor under users. So these language learners are not focused on correctness, probably because they they don't know as well whether their sentences adhere to the grammar rules. They don't know as well whether they are already making mispronounced words or not. These learners believe that it's if something sounds well, that is already correct. Like I think this is what we call auditory grammarian, wherein, as far as we know, it's not precise all the time. We cannot rely on the sound all the time, right? Okay. And of course, we also have the last one here. That is the optimal monitor user. So these are the speakers or the learners who can speak fluently without having any hindrances in speaking. So the question is, are you guys a monitor over user, a monitor under user, or an optimal monitor user? Well, then it's for you to figure out. Okay, so now let's jump into the fourth hypothesis. That is the input hypothesis statement. Okay, well, here, the fourth theory explains that learners actually progress, or um, they develop learning the language as they comprehend it. All right. And then they also advance their level as time passes by. For example, the first time that I've heard about the word subble, of course it was difficult for me to remember that. So what I did to increase my retention skill, or to remember that word, I looked on the dictionary, I checked for the definition, and then the moment that I was able to comprehend it already, I was able to remember it quickly, understand it easily too. So that is the input hypothesis. For you to learn a language, the key is comprehension. So are you guys like this one too? Like you prefer to understand it first for you to be able to master it? Of course you do. Yes, we all do. Okay. All right. And now let's go on to the fifth one here, and that is the affective filter hypothesis. So here, this is a metaphor, and this describes a learner's attitude that affects the relative success of language acquisition. So basically here, there are a lot of factors to consider for you to acquire a language successfully. For example, this could be motivation, confidence, or an anxiety. For example, what about you? What is your motivation to study another language? What motivates you to study English? Okay, probably because you want to be on top of your class. You want to get a better job in the future. You believe that knowing a lot of languages will pave the way for you to have a lot of opportunities too. Knowing that you can earn dollars, you can earn euros. It sounds cool, right? All right. Okay, so these motivations that you have actually fuel you to learn this language. The reality is that if you know that you're not going to benefit from something, you don't study that. You tend to be lazy in studying that. According to philosophy, each person acts depending on the benefit that he's going to get on something. Do you agree? Well, certainly. Okay, so those are the five hypotheses of language acquisition. All right, and now this lesson is open for questions. So if you guys have any concerns, you can now type them in the chat box, and I'm going to answer them one by one later on. All right. Okay, so now I'm gonna give you a short post test just to figure out if you have understood something about my lesson. Okay, and then the first question: what are the five hypotheses about second language acquisition? What are the differences between the basic types of performer? So we have the monitor over users, monitor under users, and the optimal monitor users. Okay, you can answer these questions in your mind, and let's check it out later. Okay? All right. And the last one, these are the sources of my report, just for you to find out where I've got the information that I just shared to you guys. Okay? All right. So again, I want to say thank you for watching my video. And again, please don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell for more videos to watch. Again, I'm Nika de la Vega, and I believe that learning a language is difficult, so we must all study with zeal. Thank you so much. 再见，谢谢。